My name is Bryce Corbett. I'm the presenter of Squiz Kids and the director of the program. What we're going to do to kick off is just give you, I'm not going to assume you all know exactly what Squiz Kids is, nor indeed Newshounds, the program that we've created to help kids become critical consumers of media. So we will start by explaining all of that. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which I podcast and am speaking to you from, and that is the Turrbal people, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. So helping kids become critical consumers of media. Just by introduction and background, I have worked as a journalist for 25, 26 years, both here in Australia and overseas. So that gives some context to how and why I created Squiz Kids. It also gives some context as to how and why I've created Newshounds as well, and why I think making sure that our kids are critical consumers of media and are able to spot misinformation when they come across it online is as vital a life skill, in my opinion, as reading, writing and arithmetic. And we'll explain why I think that's the case as we go along. Squiz Kids, just by way of introduction, is a daily news podcast. We go out to approximately 200,000 families and their children every day, and we are listened to in approximately 5,000 to 6,000 classrooms around Australia, and interestingly around the world as well. We have a segment at the end of our podcast every day which is called Classroom Shoutouts, where we give shout-outs to classrooms who are listening to us. And I never cease to be amazed the breadth of the listenership. It goes across this wide brown land of ours and stretches out across the world. It is simultaneously extremely gratifying and extremely humbling. To that end, we conducted a survey in the beginning of this year whereby we asked our audience about kids, well, asked the parents and teachers who make up our audience about kids and their media consumption habits. It was a survey that received 775 responses. You can see the breakdown there between parents who responded and teachers who responded. And it was specifically asking them about how kids are interacting with news media. We're in a completely different world now, as I know I don't need to explain to any of you. And I'm sure if any of you have children, you've had the same experience that I've had, which is you see your children come to the dinner table at night and they will tell you things that they've seen online, things that they've read on their Instagram feeds, or things they've picked up while scrolling through TikTok or watching YouTube, things that have been presented to them as fact, and that they don't have the critical faculty to really determine whether or not it is fact or have any reason to believe it wouldn't be fact, and are therefore believing these things unquestioningly. It's for that reason that we created Newshounds, which I'll come on to explain in a moment. But first of all, I'll just give you a sense of why it's an important thing that we are doing with respect to media literacy. As part of the survey we did, we asked respondents, where are kids getting their news and information? And happily, family conversations rate very highly. Kids are getting their news and information also from teachers to a large extent. Squiz Kids is, again, I'm very happy to report there was a lot of people saying that they were relying upon Squiz Kids, our daily news podcast, as a source of news and information for kids. Information they pick up in the playground from friends, obviously. The traditional forms of media, perhaps unsurprisingly, rank relatively lowly. Newspapers right down the bottom. I've been to some schools and taught Newshounds program in some classrooms, funnily enough, and I've taken in actual newspapers. And there are instances, I kid you not, of kids looking at that as if they've never seen one before in their life. And as an old newspaper journalist, that makes me a little bit sad and worried, but this is the reality. Kids are not getting their news from the traditional sources that we may have gotten them from when we were growing up. Worryingly, they are getting lots of their news and information from social media. And I'll just point out, because I think it's an interesting disparity between parents reporting that their kids are getting news and information from social media sits at 24%, whereas teachers are reporting it's much more like 60%. And I would submit that teachers have their finger on that pulse much more than parents do. So the takeouts there, traditional media is playing a diminishing role in informing young kids, and lots more teachers are aware that kids are getting their news and information from social media than parents are. Broken down, according to parents and teachers, 41% of kids aged 7 to 12 are getting news and information from social media. That is something that should make us all quake in fear, to be perfectly honest. If you've ever, and I'm sure you have, wandered across the landscape of social media, it's utterly unfettered. Anybody can write anything in there. People can present themselves as things that they are not, as entities that they are not, as authorities that with authority they simply do not have. And kids don't have any way of discerning fact from fiction in an online environment. One of the other questions we asked was, on a scale of 0 to 100, how worried are you about your child or your student, in the case of teachers, being exposed to misinformation on social media? And the numbers there speak for themselves. Teachers and parents alike, obviously aware that children being exposed to fake news, misinformation and disinformation on social media is of enormous concern to them. We also ask, on a scale of 0 to 100, how confident are you that your child can tell what information that they come across is fake and what is true? It was relatively, perhaps higher than I anticipated or expected in terms of what teachers and parents thought their kids were capable of with respect to discerning fake news when they came across it. But one of the questions that we also asked, and this is obviously quite telling, is asked of teachers, have you received any media literacy professional development, any training in how to teach media literacy or explain to your classes what it is and why it's important? 90% said that they hadn't received that professional development, or if they had, that they needed more. Enter Newshounds. And that little character you see there with the magnifying glass sniffing on the ground is Squizzy the Newshound. And Squizzy the Newshound is our ambassador for all things Newshounds. He is, as you can see, a detective dog who specializes in sniffing out fishy stories on the internet. We built Newshounds in a game-like format. In essence, it is, well, I've explained to you what Squiz Kids is. Newshounds is an 8-part media literacy podcast series. So we do podcasting. That's what we do. We have become somewhat expert in the production of content that kids find engaging and also informative. I like to describe everything we do at Squiz Kids as like sugar-coated broccoli, in as much as we get kids to eat this stuff because it's fun, it's engaging, it's delivered in a tone that they find really engaging, yet they don't know that they are being fed nutrition by stealth at the same time. And that's very much what we've done with Newshounds as well. Newshounds is an 8-part media literacy podcast series that comes with classroom activities, classroom worksheets, and a classroom work booklet for students. And crucially, it also comes with a teacher manual. So we recognize that this is not an area of expertise for teachers or teacher librarians. And so we have created, using our knowledge of newsrooms, using our knowledge of classrooms. I should have said at the beginning that Christy is a fully qualified primary school teacher, and Amanda Bauer, who was the person who helped me write the Newshounds program, is that wonderful unicorn of having been a former journalist who then saw the light to become a primary school teacher. So we use that expertise to put together a program that helps to demystify the creation of news from our point of expertise, having worked in newsrooms for many years, but we've packaged it up in a curriculum-aligned way so that it can slot very neatly into classrooms around the country. And we've created resources for kids to use in the classroom, to listen along to the podcast and fill out worksheets as they go, but then also crucially a teacher manual, which helps teachers to understand what's the objective of this particular episode of Newshounds. What are you going to need to do beforehand? What research should you have on hand? And links out to all sorts of resources to help them teach each podcast and each session. Squizzy, the Newshound, has a catchphrase, which is to stop, think, and check. Really fascinating anecdotal evidence has come back to us that kids who have done the Newshounds course will then take what they have learned back home and have started to educate their own parents about media literacy, such that we're seeing around the dinner table in homes all over Australia a kind of a reverse transfer of knowledge, whereby parents will perhaps talk about something that they've seen on their Facebook feed or they may have come across online or on social media, and their kids are starting to challenge them and say, is that true, Mum and Dad, or did you actually stop, think and check before actually going ahead and believing that was in fact a piece of factual information? So the Stop, Think, Check runs throughout all of the 8 episodes of our podcast. And I don't need to tell you that sort of repetition is really important when you're teaching primary school kids. And we've found that it's been extremely effective. We launched Newshounds last November at the beginning of school term 4 here in Australia. Our goal was to have 500 classrooms signed up by July of this year. We now have approximately that 1,450 number has gone up in the last week or so. We're now sitting at just under 1,500 classrooms around Australia who are in the process of undertaking the Newshounds Media Literacy Program. We think that's amazing. We are incredibly bowled over by the response that it's had and the enthusiasm with which it's been taken up and the feedback that we've had. I forgot to actually mention probably the most crucial part of all of this, and that is that Newshounds is free. We have entered into a partnership with the Google News Initiative, which essentially is them giving us some money and without any strings attached to make this resource available for free to primary schools all over Australia and New Zealand. So as a result of the fact that we are free, we are spread out. Those 1,450 classrooms are all over the country. 18% of them are in regional Australia, which we're really gratified by. 42% of the schools using Newshounds are public schools, and 14 of our schools are in remote communities. So we think we've probably got at this moment in time about 40,000 Aussie kids who are studying to become Newshounds. Because we knew that it was important that we got feedback on how effective the program is as a piece of education, we have employed Dr. Amanda Levito from the Queensland University of Technology. She is one of Australia's foremost academic authorities on digital literacy, digital technologies, and the impact that digital technologies generally are having upon children in Australia. She's in the process of producing a report on how effective Newshounds is as a piece of, as an educational resource. That report is due in the next month or so. We've seen some early results. She's done focus groups with schools and with teachers and with students who have been doing the Newshounds course. And happily, they've reported on, she's able to report the effectiveness, and what she's seen, and certainly in her conversations with teachers and parents, is that children's levels of awareness of the media and what media is and who makes media and why people make media and what possible reasons people might want to make media to influence the way you think, kids' awareness around those concepts has gone up having done Newshounds, and that's something obviously that we're very proud of and extremely gratified by. For some reason now my screen is not changing.
Take over, Bryce, if you like.
Got it. Very quickly, I just wanted to explain too that how Newshounds has been built, and it's been built specifically for primary school kids. We've built it as an online board game, if you can imagine. So with every session, every child is playing to win or to earn a badge. So the first badge is a magnifying glass. A magnifying glass to seek out the truth. The next badge they're playing for in session 2 is a torch, which shines a light on misinformation and disinformation. There's a set of keys, there's binoculars, there's a set of handcuffs to arrest misinformation. And at the end of it, they become a fully fledged newshound. They receive a certificate, and there's a whole bunch of posters that we've produced in association that can go up in classrooms. There's a whole bunch of resources that teachers can cut out and stick in booklets, so kids get a sense of that they're progressing through the course. And Christy, is that where I throw it over to you?
Yeah, that's great, Bryce. So a headline like this is what we would definitely call clickbait, and it's something that I would definitely click on. Giant man-eating turtle terrorizes city, and I think a lot of our kids would as well. And this sort of thing, coming across this as your kids are on devices, is just going to be a real teaching point. So since we've discovered through the research that we've done, they actually know what clickbait is. They know that it's something, their headline that's designed to get them to click on that. But what we found that they don't know is, why is this clickbait? Like, why is it being produced? Why do some news sites use it? Why do websites use them, and how do they make money from them? So taking that next step and actually educating kids about where clickbait comes from, why it's used, and how people make money from that is really, really important. And that Newshounds has got some information to share with you with that. Sorry to people who don't like needles. What I found really interesting is that Newshounds has been seen as something that can inoculate against fake news. So with the rise of the presidency of Donald Trump and the COVID-19 pandemic happening at a similar time, and vaccinations being a really prominent thing in the news, academics raised the term infodemic. So that's something that as a society we're in the middle of. And behavioural scientists started thinking about inoculation as something that we could do to prevent the spread of fake news. So actually inoculating against misinformation or disinformation by kind of exposure therapy that academics have called pre-bunking. It's kind of a societal psychological inoculation. So while that sounds very deep and meaningful, it's really exposing kids to what they're going to come across online anyway, but in a controlled way with an explanation, so that at the time then they do come across it when they're on their own, on their device, in their bedrooms, they can then stop, think and check, and not go ahead and spread that fake news themselves, or just be consumers of misinformation or disinformation without questioning it. What we really want is for the program that we're using to be relevant. And as we're presenting this to primary kids, so from probably about 7 years old to 12 years old, having that relevance and currency, if it's something that they're interested in, could be something to do with gaming or sport or coming from that sort of background, that needs to be relevant for them to take an interest in it. Something that's familiar. Pokemon, Barbie, lots of fake information about things out there at the moment. So it's something that's familiar that they can then connect with. It has to be meaningful, and it has to be engaging and fun also. Many of you may have used or seen in previous years the Northwest tree octopus. This has been used by teachers and I think librarians for quite some time. And if you don't know, it's a fake website about the Pacific Northwest tree octopus and its endangered status. And it invites parents and teachers to come and speak to kids about how they could recognise that maybe this isn't true, what they might need to think about, but in a fun and engaging way. And we've just taken that a step further with Newshounds. So what we're really cognizant of is limiting the media literacy material to age appropriateness, planting the seed of critical media consumption, and then really empowering students and teachers, I guess, at the same time, if this is something that you haven't covered in depth yourself before, to really be able to think deeply and logically about information that you can cross online. This is something that your kids might see fairly regularly, is asking them to put bank account details in. Mr. Beast is going to give them $1,000, but we need your bank account details first. So all this sort of thing is things that they're coming across on a daily basis online. And we're just trying to make them stop and think before they actually go ahead and interact with these sort of sites. So I've just provided this image from the Newshounds program just to show you that sort of level of engagement and fun. It's really bright. It's asking students to identify which areas of this image are media. So we've got bus advertising, we've got newspapers, there's a theatre where you might have cinema advertising, and the sort of level of student that can access this is from really quite young. So the program does have points of differentiation within it. As Bryce said, it's 8 podcasts with accompanying classroom materials. You don't have to do the whole program. So you can just actually cherry pick and choose between the units that you might want to teach and want to run with, or even just individual resources within Newshounds that you may come across. There are really fun awards and certificates and all sorts of things throughout the program. So you can actually access those at the beginning and dole those out yourself where you feel like you'd like to, or you can use the board game format and then run through the whole program step by step. So, moving on, we're also identifying misinformation and disinformation. So we're looking at stars like Rihanna. We're also using Pokemon Go as one of our stimulus, and then asking students to then delve a bit deeper and complete some activities where they can interact with each other, listen to the podcast, and figure out what they think and then also do. So it's sort of a go and then do program. But I'm going to introduce you in a moment to Catherine Zernicke, who is a teacher who's done the program, and just going to ask her a couple of questions about how she found it to give you a bit more information about how that might look in the classroom. So as Bryce said earlier, we're sniffing out fishy stories, trying to look at the validity and the reliability of the information because there is so much out there. Couple of takeaways for you. So just things that you may not have known or you may already know, but hopefully you can use these and they'll be useful for you. So did you know there are actually hundreds of dedicated fact-checking websites out there that can do most of that heavy lifting for you? Just included some images of a few of them. RMIT ABC Fact Check is an Australian service that the ABC and RMIT offer. Many of us will already heard of Snopes and possibly be using that. The newspaper fact checks, such as the Washington Post, are really good also if you're looking for source material to use with kids about facts that have been debunked recently. They've got a lot of information on there. So if your kids come across something that they're unsure about on the internet, you can actually then support them to go through, use one of these fact-checking websites and see if someone's already done the heavy lifting for you. I'm not sure how many people have used this. I hadn't used it until recently. Google offers an easy-to-use reverse image search. So often we're coming across images online that we're unsure if now they're AI generated or if they are what they actually claim to be. So when you're on Google, if you're up in the top right-hand corner and want to do an image search, you can just click on images up there. And then when your Google screen comes up, there's a little camera there. And if you click on that, that'll then invite you to actually submit an image. So if you see something online, you can screenshot it, open up Google, click on your little camera, and then it invites you to drag the image across. So this is the next scene you'll see where you can just drag a file over and upload it to Google search, and then it'll do a reverse image search for you. So here's one that we came across recently that claimed to be a lightning strike victim, and it was shared a lot of times. So when we popped it into Google image search, you can find an image source, and that's what you want to do. So you've got find image source at the top there, and it'll give you a massive list of everywhere that image has appeared online previously. So doing that image search, there were just a couple, a little bit further down the list, that we found that it was actually not from a lightning strike, and it was special effects makeup. And then if you go further into that actor was actually preparing for a zombie movie. So then you can go back and actually find the original time that image was published and what it was actually for. Finally, and we haven't really included this in this iteration of the Newshounds program, but hopefully for our next iteration coming up, but I wanted to share it with you, that because AI is such a big topic with ChatGPT and Bard out there, and kids are obviously using this just sometimes to create nursery rhymes or crazy stories, but also, I guess, in the classroom as well. So there is an AI-powered search engine and chatbot that provides citations. So a teacher friend shared this with me, and they're using it and teaching their kids with it. So Perplexity AI, and it acts just like any of the other AI chatbot websites. You can ask it a question and it'll find a response for you, or write an essay for you, or do whatever you like. However, it provides citations for you. So I wanted to find out how accurate the Big Mac index was, where you're comparing the value of money across different currencies using the Big Mac. So I just typed that in, and I came back with some information for me. But you'll notice along the top there are citations from Investopedia, from The Economist, academic one from Springer. So it tells me where all that information has come from. So then I can go further and do my own fact checking on that information as well, and not rely on the hallucinations of a chatbot. What the kids say. So, but just before I introduce Catherine, this is a work that one of her students produced after using Newshounds. And I really love the portion in there that says it's important to stop the spread of fake news, because lots of people from all around the world watch and listen to news. And if people around the world believe in the dis or misinformation, it could cause people to spread that fake news to other friends or relatives. I just thought that was a really good takeaway. Catherine.
Hello.
Are you there? Hello. Catherine is a PYP, Primary Years Program Specialist Teacher. She works for Somerset College on the Gold Coast, and her specialty, I guess, is in information literacy. And also, is it primary years STEAM, Catherine, that your specialist area is?
Yes. So just this year, I actually started to teach year 1 and 2 STEAM lessons, which is a lot of fun as well.
That's fabulous. Thank you so much for joining us. So I have a couple of questions for you.
Sure.
Firstly, would you be able to tell us about your overall first impressions of Newshounds?
Absolutely. So just a little bit of background. I was actually sent, I think it was an online article that a friend of mine saw about the Newshounds program about a year ago, and she sent it to me. And I said, that's exactly what I need, because I was about to start in term 4 last year a new unit of inquiry about producers and consumers, and I really wanted to focus on how we are producers and consumers of media. And it was just like all the stars aligned. When I saw that article, I'm like, I need this in my life. So I basically had done a little bit of research myself and found both Bryce and Amanda's contact information, emailed them over the holidays and said, can I please have access to this? And I was lucky enough to have early access to the first two podcasts, as well as I wanted to show you the teacher guide, as well as the student booklet. And to say the least, I was very excited. First impressions were just having a teacher guide straight away just made things so much easier for me. It was just easy to follow. And I guess in summary, I would just say that it was like a turnkey solution. Often, I'm doing my own research, as we all do, to find the best resources to present to our students. But basically the work was done for me. I could, as you mentioned before, I could cherry pick what examples I wanted to use. I only see my students once a week as a specialist teacher. So I am a bit time poor, so I was able to choose particular examples that I thought were appropriate for their age in year 5. So that was amazing. The dashboard and the online interface was really user-friendly, so I really appreciated that aspect of it as well. Oh, and one last thing, the fact that teachers and journalists, experts in your field, came together to put this program together just gave me instant confidence that I could use this resource and know that it was reliable and trustworthy.
That's really cool, Catherine. How did the kids receive it? What were their impressions?
I think overall, the fact that they would, after we did our first lesson, that we listened to the podcast and then did the accompanying booklet activities, the fact that they were asking me the next day when their next lesson was, because they couldn't wait to do it again, I think that says it all. They absolutely loved it. It was just, again, the resources being colorful, me popping up the podcast on the screen, and their initial thoughts were like, we can't see a picture. And I said, that's the whole point. You're actually just going to listen. But then having those images and things afterwards to refer to were great. But little things like the tone of it, the little fun sound effects, the game board format, I actually, rather than them gluing in their badges in their booklet, I blew up the game board. I have 4 different year 5 classes, and I blew that up in a big version and gave them a badge to glue up on there afterwards. And there were healthy little arguments about who was going to glue it on. So yeah, they loved it. They absolutely loved it.
That's wonderful. Wonderful to hear, Catherine.
Other than loving it, Catherine, what do you think they got out of it? Do you think it changed the way they approached media after they'd done the program?
I would say absolutely. This is something that we, in information literacy lessons, we focus on research skills, we look at cyber safety, and this sort of really reinforce the things that we talk about and learn about in their information literacy lessons. So they absolutely, I hear them saying, especially afterwards, questioning the things that they see. So for instance, the tree octopus website, I did that, and I still use that in my lessons in year 3. And so things like, can we trust this, or we should double check that, what other websites can we use? So just hearing that in their everyday conversations when they're working on a research task, for instance, is, I think that says it all. So yes, absolutely.
As one of the products or outcomes, your kids produced their own podcast, is that right?
Yeah, so this was, I had never done this before. We only actually did the first 5 out of the 8 modules or podcasts, but I was a little bit short on time. It was literally, we only had 2 or 3 weeks left in the school year. And I decided, I have 112 year 5 students. I thought I want to do this podcast, but I clearly can't have 112 students on the podcast. So I did a bit of a challenge, and I gave them different questions about defining what misinformation versus disinformation, what makes a good digital citizen, all these things. They submitted their responses, like the one that you showed on the screen. And I had the difficult task of choosing one student from each class. So there were 4 students. They came up. There was another part of the contest where they came up with a name for their podcast, which ultimately was DigiKids.
Nice.
And and we have an amazing IT team. So they helped me put that all together. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. And it just reinforced. It was another way to reinforce their learning and for them to be able to share what they've learned, not only through Newshounds, but over the last few years in their lessons with me as well. So yeah, it was great.
Thank you so much for sharing with us today. I know that you've got a class to teach.
I do.
Thank you and farewell.